Welcome to episode 7 of Chambers Chatter. I'm Laura Chambers-Babelis.
And I'm Shay Chambers-Helms, and we are excited today to be here with Billy Keyserling. We'll just kind of start at the beginning and kind of talk about your childhood in Beaufort.
I was a privileged child in Beaufort because I had fabulous parents. My father was a country doctor. And as a result of that, we knew everybody in Beaufort. And it troubles me today how Beaufort's changed because it's not hometown that it used to be. It's not that I don't like the new people who've come here. It's not that I don't like the stores that have come here. But we have a special character. I was giving a talk at Spring Island several years ago, and they said, what was it like to grow up in Beaufort? And I said, well, it was like Mayberry, except it's beautiful. And we celebrate diversity. We somehow have gotten along with each other. Largely, I think, because of our Reconstruction history, where black and white people mixed. They weren't friends necessarily. We had segregation. I'm not saying it was pretty, but we mixed. And we're not afraid of each other generally. And secondly, because we had the military, and every 3 years we had new friends and new students. So new people coming to Beaufort didn't bother us, and we sort of absorbed them. And I think we've sort of lost that acceptance and that friendliness, and it's a reflection of the country. But anyway, living in a small town, everybody knew everybody. I could grow up on Rebo Road. And I went to Beaufort Elementary, which is where USCB is today. And then the 4th grade, we moved to a mobile unit behind Beaufort High School, which is where Beaufort Elementary is today.
Wow.
And then we went to the 4th grade, the 5th grade, we went to Battery Creek Elementary on Burroughs Avenue. But then we got moved to the junior high school, which is where the high school had been.
Oh my gosh.
Berry Street. With Miss Brown in the 6th grade. So, and then we stayed there for junior high school. So we bounced around. But I could walk out of my yard and look over my shoulder, and as soon as someone saw me, they'd stop and offer me a ride to school.
Oh, wow.
So, my father could say we had to walk 10 miles to school. I said I had to walk to the end of the driveway, let someone see my face, and they knew who I was. And they'd offer to take me somewhere.
That's pretty cool.
And that's the hometown that's what I like about a hometown.
Absolutely.
That we smile at each other, we listen to each other, we can agree to disagree, and get along. And I get troubled that Beaufort is a reflection of the country today. We've grown fast, and we've got to grow because that's opportunities. But we've also chasing some of the younger people away because they can't afford to live here. From your real estate experience and mine as well, we know that a nurse, school teacher, firefighter, police officer really has a hard time finding a home.
Really hard.
And there are staples.
And we don't want to lose those people because those are the people who make our community work.
Yeah.
So anyway, I lived on Rebo Road. I had a paper route. I used to go up and down Rebo Road and then end up in the 100 Pines, this neighborhood. And then I delivered TV guides as well. One of my favorite stories about TV guides.
I don't even know what a TV guide is, I don't think.
TV Guide was a little magazine that came out every week. They all the shirt. This is what you see. Okay. But I would. I have 2 newspaper stories that are just hometownish and fun, and that is Wyatt and Sally Pringle used to live at the duplex at the corner of Heritage and Rebo Road, on the southwest corner. And I go to pick up to collect every month. It was $1.95 for the News and Courier, and Sally would always say, Billy, it's not part of my budget. Could you ride your bike downtown and get the $1.95 from Watkins? So I had to ride downtown to collect this $1.95.
Oh, my God.
And then there was a Mr. Darby on Rebo Road who was an elderly man, and he had what we'd call Parkinson's today, and he scared me So I never collected from him. I just gave him the newspaper. One morning, this was back when Rebo Road was covered with, it was 2 lanes. It was covered with oaks. It was one of the most beautiful streets you can imagine. And I was delivering the papers, but I fell asleep on my bicycle and I hit a mailbox.
How on earth? What?
It threw me down on the street. I was okay. But you got to know people because I went and collected from them. And anyway, I mowed people's lawns and the TV guides. I came all the way back in here. I remember Jeannie Shepard was one of my favorites. And she was, of course, they lived next door to, next door to the Chambers.
You did.
I did on Fripp Street. And I was in love with that woman forever. Unfortunately, she passed early. But she was wonderful. But, then in those days, you were on bicycles or walking. There wasn't all the traffic, but people were just friendly.
It's so interesting as you say this, and as we've kind of learned some other stories, the children were so much more involved back in the day. And now we see that the children were scared to let them out because of the world that we're in. So it's so fascinating how it was so much more community driven back then because the children were so much more engaged within the community.
I think you're absolutely right. We had active sports. And the one challenge, of course, at least for me personally and my family, was the segregation. Because as said to Ed, you didn't go to the teenage canteen where we went. You weren't part of Troop 1, Boy Scouts. That's just not the way it was. But we did get along. It was really fun to go downtown after school. A bit, if you didn't have an activity, we'd go downtown and sort of park ourselves on a parking meter, hang on a parking meter, and wave to people as they went by. Or go into Luther's, where actually Ed was working as a young guy, and I remember him working there, and they had a soda fountain there. So we'd go get a cherry Coke or something, and then we'd go outside and either sit on the scale, which was outside, or hang on the, and wave to everybody. And I knew the older boys. I had an inkling for cars, and I didn't grow up with my age group in Beaufort. I grew up with older guys. I would have been 10, 11, 12, 13, and they would have been 16, 17, some of them 18, and maybe even juniors.
Oh, wow.
They had a car club. It was called the Dixie Dukes. And I was a junior member of the Dixie Dukes.
The Dixie.
And so when my friends were having parties and playing spin the bottle and having girlfriends and stuff like that, I would go to the drag strip. My parents were pretty good about letting me go. They trusted the older boys who took me to the drag strip in Walterboro on Saturday night.
Oh, gosh.
And I had a Go-Kart, and they helped me soup it up. And one day I got stopped for speeding. I was going 55 miles an hour on the sidewalk on Rebo Road.
On your Go-Kart? In a Go-Kart. Oh, my gosh.
Police officer stopped me and said, "Billy, I'm going to tell your dad." And, that was a problem of being popular because when we worked, many of us worked in the packing sheds in the summer. I happened to work at Shapiro's, but there were Sanders and there were a number of packing, Joneses and number of packing sheds. And we would take the ripe tomatoes, the overripes that they couldn't sell, because as you know, they shipped the tomatoes green in refrigerated trucks. But the ripes they would throw away, so we'd put them in a case, in a box, and we'd put them in the car. And my mother had a 1972 baby blue Tempest convertible, and I was 14. She would let me take it sometimes to work. So coming back one day from the packing house, we put a crate in the back seat in the middle, and then 2 people were on their knees facing the back, and we were tossing ripe tomatoes at cars, our friends who were coming with us. Well, as it so happened, the bridge opened. Oh, and all of a sudden, I was able to scoot in front of this African-American man, and he was in the station wagon. The back of his car was open, and all the tomatoes went in his. By the time I got home, Maybelle, who was the woman who really ran our home and was like a mother. In many ways, she was closer than a mother. Said, you've been in some trouble. And I said, what do you mean? She said, so-and-so just called me and told me to tell Dr. K that you were driving reckless and throwing tomatoes.
Oh my God. You could never do that today.
I said, Maybelle, please don't tell him. He'll take away my license. He'll somehow scold me. And she told him. And he just made me promise I wouldn't do it again. My parents were very, very forgiving, I guess I would say. They knew what kids were. They were also trusting, which is sort of a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
You know, when your parents trust you so much, how can you do things wrong? You know, if they don't trust you, then you can prove them right.
Right.
And do bad things. That was our summers. And then sailing. Sailing was really big back then. When I was about 7 or 8, Jimmy Thomas Sr. and Albert Kinghorn and my father bought sailfish kits, and they built sailfish,
Oh, how fun.
which was like a surfboard basically, or a sailboard. And we learned when we were 7 and 8 to sail. And then we moved up to sunfish, which were a little bit bigger and had a hole where you put your feet. And but there were hundreds of us.
Yeah.
And the sailing club was really the parking lot where there were racks where we'd stack our boats. And then we could ride our bikes there, and we'd leave our sails. No one shall steal anything.
Wow.
And that whole end on the west side of the parking lot, when you drove in to the right, it was just a row of stack of boats piled up. And on any Saturday, Sunday, or weekday during the summer, you'd see 20, 30, 40 of us out there sailing, and you'd see us over on the sandbar and smoke a little cigarette every now and then, but tobacco cigarette. We didn't know about the other. And but it was just your parents trusted you.
Yeah.
And you know, they'd let us out in the river at that age, but they knew there were parents along the bluff who were looking out for us.
Right.
If anyone got in trouble, they were going to call our parents, or they were going to go down on their dock, or they were going to get in their boat, or they were going to go downtown to where the marina is today, and get us help. Yeah. And we don't have that world today.
No. Such a sense of community and trust.
So important and part of the character, as much as the historic homes, and as much as the history as we have, the hometown character is, to me, as important as our historic elegance.
Yeah.
But Beaufort was a great place to grow up. When I went away to boarding school because in the 9th grade, I got a D. I'd never gotten anything below a B in world history because I couldn't read. And that's when the year I got caught. I learned to listen, so I always was a good student because I could remember and retain. But I couldn't read that big, fat world history book. And so I got a D, and my parents said, there's something wrong. And they didn't know what dyslexia was or attention deficit. Well, I didn't know all these, what we know today. So I just had a, quote, reading problem. And I unfortunately got branded with the reading problem, so I still think I have a reading problem. Well, I do because of my eyes, but other than that, I can read. But so I was fortunate in that they sent me away to a very small boarding school. And I didn't want to go. I wanted to go. I knew I needed to go. I didn't want to go. Because I was on the junior varsity football team, and I had been involved in sports. And I didn't want to leave my friends.
Sure.
But Coach Small and Sheldon were very good because boarding school started late. So even though I was going away to school, they let me go to Paris Island, where the football team spent a week in August getting ready for the season. So they always included me, and when I came home, they included me, and they took me to games. And I somehow left town for many years, but I always came home feeling that I belonged.
Yeah.
Even after being away for 26 years of boarding school and college, graduate school and a career in Washington, D.C. When I came home, it was night on the town. Was the night that I came home to visit my parents. It was going to be a surprise visit. And I worked for a congressman, and he had a guy who flew him back and forth. And he was flying to South Carolina. So he said, "Do you want to ride?" And so they dropped me off in Beaufort. And so I decided I'd go. I went to my parents' house over and right down the creek here in Battery Creek. And there wasn't anybody home. So there was a car there. So I took the car and I went downtown. And it was packed.
Yeah.
It was Christmas, first Friday of December, whatever it was. It was night on the town. And as I walked down the street, I felt so at home.
Yeah.
I saw old friends and I met new friends. And of course, I found my parents there because it was a gathering. And back then, it's more like a circus today to say that, with the sideshows of the performances and stuff. It used to be a way to get people into stores to shop. And so you'd go into a store and they had refreshments and they would entertain you and you'd look at their stuff. Now it's sometimes even hard to get into stores because there's so much activity on the street.
Yeah.
But even, I guess I say, after being away for all of those years, and that night, I went home and I told my parents, I think I'm going to move home.
Yeah. Oh.
And the next day I went to see Steve Stanley, who owned the Beaufort bookshop right next to Harry's. And I rented the piece that crosses the alley. Upstairs. There's a room there that's now it's part of the Beaufort bookshop and it's now been incorporated, but it was a little room. You go up Harry's steps to get there, and I opened an office and started a little business and was commuting back and forth from Washington.
Oh, wow.
And I got here, but it was like almost like I hadn't been home.
Yeah.
There are people here who say, "Oh, I remember you when we were playing football in 11th grade." I wasn't here in 11th grade. When Dick Stewart said to me, "Oh, we played football." I wasn't here when Dick Stewart came to Beaufort. But what the devil? At least I'd rather than say, "Who the hell are you?"
Yeah, absolutely.
Not say, "Who the hell are you?" So, Beaufort is a place that's very difficult. You're natives, grew up here. Your parents grew up here. Your grandfather grew up here. I had an incredible relationship with your grandfather. It was love-hate.
Any good stories to share there?
He was very, very tough. And I remember once on a camping trip, I was in Troop 1. We were camping behind one of the Trask fields on Salem Farm. And Bert Kinghorn and I were cold, so we pulled our sleeping bags up next to the fire, and the wind shifted, and we woke up with our sleeping bags on fire.
Oh, no.
He wasn't very happy with that.
I could imagine.
Nobody was hurt, but he wasn't happy with that. I worked at Burton Block one summer, and I got stung in the eye by a bee. And he just thought I was supposed to keep working, and so I quit. So from that point on, I was a quitter. I'll never forget one of the last long conversations I had with your grandfather was I went to his office after I was elected mayor, and I said, "You made the park, and you're a hero for that, and it wasn't easy. You got a lot of opposition." I said, "I hope my legacy will be that we can create a national park around Reconstruction." And he said, "Billy, you're silly. You'll never get that done." I only wish he was here
I know.
to see that because he didn't support me politically. He thought I was too liberal. But he switched his parties around too because he was always leveraging politics to do things for the city of Beaufort. And that's how he got the money for the park. And for the Beaufort Jasper and for the water department when they put the plant out at Dawtaw. They got a community development block grant because at Dawtaw they put in the sewer system, then Dawtaw paid the city back. Very, very creative. But we had a love-hate. He didn't support me politically. I think he did support me when I ran for mayor. And I think it's because he trusted that unlike some of the others, really knew and loved this community.
Yeah.
Now, my grandfather and your grandfather and Henry Chambers had a very unique relationship too, because my grandfather and your grandfather didn't like to talk about this, so I don't want to talk about dysfunction in his family, but my grandfather actually sent him to college and followed him through college and helped him. And my grandfather and his father, I think it was his father, were partners in Burton Lock and the Beaufort Ice Company.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And during the Depression, my grandfather had been big into farming. And but in the end, all he owned was the ice company. He sold out, or they split up the ice company and the block company and my father. But working with him, we did that summer. I got stung by the bee. If you go to USCB and you see that frieze on the wall on the new wing, we made those at Burton Lock.
Oh, wow.
You had an artist come. They would put sand in and pack it in, and then they would have an artist come and carve the images. Then they'd pour the cement on it, and they would pick up the sand. And when they finally dried, they could take it out of the boxes, and they were these slabs about this wide and I guess 8 feet or so tall.
Wow. Hard labor.
It was something, but I do worry. I loved being mayor. It's the best job I ever had.
It's a hard job.
We want to take a quick break to thank our sponsor, Watkins Mechanical.
Hey y'all, it's Josh with Watkins Mechanical. Warm weather is finally here and your system is working hard to keep you cool. Here are 3 quick tips to help. 1. Replace your air filters monthly. Restrictions cause your system to work harder and reduce your air quality. 2. Keep your outdoor unit clean. Remove any leaves, debris, or dirt for proper airflow. 3. Set your thermostat at a constant temperature. Programmable thermostats improve efficiency and help save you money. For quality service and lasting results, call Watkins Mechanical, trusted in the Lowcountry for over 25 years. Brian, whatever it takes.
I learned that I finally got my own voice when I became mayor. You know, I've been involved in politics. I worked on Capitol Hill for 16 years in the House and then the Senate. Did a management study, ran an international human rights organization dealing with the Soviet Union, worked with Secretary of State George Bush and President Reagan. And I mean, I had some great experiences. But when you're mayor, you can do things. If there's a pothole, you can call the mayor and the mayor's going to get it fixed.
No.
And if the garbage isn't picked up, it's going to be picked up if you call.
Yeah.
And in Washington, the problems are just so big and bulky. And money got to the point where I was going to run for Congress once, and I realized this was 1978. I'd been chief of staff for a congressman and decided to come home and run for Congress. But when I figured it out, I had to raise $2,000 a day every day of my life to be a member of Congress if I won. And I said, money's too important. Now it's probably $10,000 a day because there's millions of dollars. And politics has become way too money-oriented and special interest-oriented.
Yeah.
And if we don't give a lot of money to a candidate, we don't get recognized. And it's not necessarily corrupt. It's that if you work in a congressman's office, you know, every day you get this many pink slips of people who called you. So you go through them, and who do you call first? You call the people who gave you money. It's logical. They're your friends. You call the people who raised money for you.
Yeah.
But that poor elderly couple that hasn't gotten a Social Security check for 2 months never gets called.
Yeah. It's really sad.
But Beaufort, you know, the reality is maybe we've grown the wrong way, who knows? Yeah. But I see my vision for Beaufort is we're going to be 3 cities in one. And that, because I don't believe that we don't need more roads.
Yeah.
We need better planning. So that if you live on Ladies Island, you ought to be able to purchase anything you need on a daily basis without crossing a bridge. If you live on this side of Battery Creek, that side of Battery Creek, then you should be able to buy what you need over there. So that downtown Beaufort doesn't become just this racetrack through which you go to get from Ladies Island or St. Helena or Fripp to Walmart. You can get to Walmart without having to cross a bridge or create congestion.
Right.
And so we're going to have a little town called Downtown Burton. We're going to have a town called Downtown Ladies Island. That'll all be part of the city or county, no matter. And then we'll have downtown. But unfortunately, the world as it is forced us to abandon our downtown as we knew it, where you could go in and everybody knew you, or I could go into Martin's bin shop and buy a new jacket or a suit, and I'll just sign a ticket and then my father a bill, And but the big retailers killed downtown Beaufort, and we, the citizens, allowed it to happen because we didn't infill downtown and keep Mickey's Bootery and Shine's department store and Belk's and give them the business. So we've resigned ourselves to becoming a tourist destination or a place to go for fine dining or art galleries and gifts, so that the typical person on a typical day has no need to be in downtown Beaufort. And so that's why I didn't oppose the hotel. It had to be within scale, but it was approved by the Historic Review Board, even though they sued and said if they didn't. We've created that.
Yeah.
We've just created that. But if we use planning properly, if we open up north of the Broad, if we allow housing up north of the air station, which isn't bridge dependent, and then they can come back to the Publix and those two large shopping centers with the Walmart.
Right.
And then when we annexed on Ladies Island, I was mayor, all we annexed was commercial because we saw a downtown, potential for a downtown where you wouldn't have to cross a bridge. So it'd be a third bridge. There'll be a third bridge in my lifetime, and I doubt there'll ever be a third bridge.
Yeah.
And the swing bridge, one of the last things I did as mayor was I raised money from the public to get a study done to create and make the swing bridge a national monument, national protected as a national site. So it will always be that way, and it should always be that way.
Should. Yeah, absolutely.
We should get patient, and we should also learn to. I have a good friend, and I'm rambling a little bit.
No,
A good friend who moved to Beaufort, and we became friends after she moved. She lived on the Point, and she was from Massachusetts and had a house up there in the Saunders. And she could only shop, when we were kids, there was a Piggly Wiggly, there was an A&P, and there was the Woods Family grocery store. There were 3 grocery stores. There were 3 banks. There were 4 automobile dealers. There were service stations where they checked your oil, to test your tires. They wiped your windshield. There were pretty much 3 of everything downtown, 3 pharmacies. And, but that died. Thank goodness for the park. Again, Henry Chambers, and Bill Cochran, who had a lot of influence on him. Bill was a developer for Alcoa, invested in downtown, and Joe Nix. But 3 of them really did with the waterfront park first, and then Joe Nix taking the old Breeze Theater that had been abandoned, and turning it back to what it had been. And that brought a revival, but it didn't bring back the old Beaufort. It brought back a new Beaufort, which was a beautiful tourist destination. And that's going to happen. And it's okay, but, the people who complain about traffic are the people who just came here.
Yeah.
And then when I was at the intersection before they put the turn, Walmart on Ladies Island, and someone beeped their horn at me to get out of their way when I couldn't make the turn. And I went, I said, if you didn't move here, we wouldn't have this traffic jam. It's That's like I was on Data one day. We were on a walk on the island, and this woman said, "This place is so beautiful. We need to preserve it." I said, "If you didn't build your house, there'd be that many more trees you got." Now, if you somehow can't get it beyond themselves, they are part of the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
The good news is that people are part of the solution.
Absolutely.
If we get and we work together and we remain civil, we will always find a common ground. And, you know, I wrote this book about sharing common ground. And because it dawned on me that if I prick your finger, what am I going to get? I'm going to get red blood. I prick my finger, what am I going to get? I'm going to get red blood. And blood is life. You can't live without blood. So we have more in common, the most important thing in the world in common, which is life. And therefore, when they start separating us by gender or by race or by religion, those are superficial. And the blood bond we have should remind us we're all in the same game. We were put on this earth to create a civil society and to protect our natural resources, and we're not in doing as good a job as we should.
Yeah.
So if we go back to that basic of blood and life and sharing, it would just be a better world.
Very well said.
Beaufort has always been that way, but I fear that it, like the rest of the world, is going to go down and get divided, come back. History's like a pendulum. It swings back and forth. But I wonder what it'll be like for your kids to grow up in Beaufort.
We both moved away too. I mean, same as you, we were attracted to come back to it. We felt the community sense, and we were both gone for a little bit and came back. But it will be interesting.
Yeah.
For the next generation.
Billy, I'm curious. What are you most proud of that you've done in Beaufort?
What am I most proud of?
I mean, you've done so much. What is, like, if you were to walk away and say, I'm so proud of this thing, what would that be?
It's going to sound a little silly. I can come up with something concrete. But I think the biggest thing I've learned and I'm most proud of is that leadership is about listening and not about talking. Not as much as I talk. But too often we don't take the time to listen to each other. We have an automatic response or a biased response, or we want to put somebody in a box. And I learned that, quite frankly, when I became mayor. It took until I became mayor to realize it, because I was up there and some constituent came up, and I never put time limits, which my council didn't like, but I always felt no one should ever leave a meeting without being heard. And but one day someone really started lighting into city council. And I said, "Who's that person talking to?" And I looked over my shoulder, and I didn't realize it was me. It was me. And even though we disagreed, even though they were being ugly, I had to listen. And I had to respond the way I thought they needed to be responded to, which was respectfully. So if you asked me what my contribution is, I tried to teach that to my successor. And he wasn't quite ready. He got tied up in social media, ended up fighting with people rather than finding ways to embrace. He's Stephen Murray's a brilliant guy, was a good mayor in terms of vision and where he's going, but just not the maturity to always stop and listen. In terms of accomplishments, I think Boundary Street was a big undertaking.
That was a big one.
And we got a lot of negative feedback. There's a lot of things that were controversial, but Boundary Street, was an environmental issue. You take stores from draining into Battery Creek. You create a park. There's a buffer between the roads, so when it splashes up, it goes into the grass. That park can be named, actually, for the 1st Carolina Colored Troops, volunteers. It's safer. Everybody said it's not going to be safe. Emergency vehicles can't get through. I don't know of any case where people don't get out of their way to let them come through. And most importantly, if you look at the day we completed that road and the value of the properties and the numbers of businesses along that corridor, I don't have the figures, but I think it probably is more than paid for the debt to do it. With all the growth that we've had on that side of Battery Creek. So Boundary Street was a tough one. The day doc used to funny me.
That was also controversial.
That was very.
That was for 28 years before I was even elected against Senator Chang. Who said if we put a little day dock so you could go downtown by boat, we were going to totally ruin the waterfront park. Does anybody see it?
No.
Except people who use it. Isn't it fun to be able to go downtown?
It was great.
Family, and park the boat and go to a restaurant or something, or sit in the
It's used every day.
And there were a number of projects like that were long-term. In City Hall project, police department, Ed talked about the police department. I remember when the police department moved in where my father's first office was, and that was basically where the Marina store is, and it was built out over the water. And it was a 2-story building, and believe it or not, a doctor's office, you had to climb up the stairs to the second floor. Dr. Ryan, who mentored my father, was in the ground floor. But when they moved, Dr. Ryan retired. In 1955, my father built his office on Bay Street, and the police department moved into there. And then they were in Port Republic next to Western Union, and then they were, I think Ed said they were, I didn't remember this, it must have been miles away, they were on Allison Road, and now they have a proper police department.
Yeah.
And what does that do for the morale? It's just, it's a wonderful place. When we had the demonstrations, with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and everything, there was rumor that there was going to be a protest across from City Hall. So the Sunday morning it was going to happen, I got on my Vespa, which I loved to ride my Vespa. You could stop and talk to people. I got on my Vespa and went down. There were these 10 guys, all of whom were African American, and I asked them what they were going to do and how it was going to work, and I wanted the city to know. And about 4 days later, one of them came to me. He said, you weren't scared when you walked into a group of 10 black men. And I said, why should I? If someone's going to punch me, the rest of you are going to have my back. Wasn't doing anything. I took one of them, interestingly, over to, it was hot the next day. And actually the police came and fire department because unfortunately, we met all of the demands for law enforcement. We were ahead of the curve with other people, with our technology, with our training, with our rules and regulations. We met all of the national demands that people threw out there, but it wasn't because of the demands that we met them. It's because that's the way Matt Clancy, who was a fabulous chief of police, brought together his men and women, who they. When the protesters were out there, they went out and put up grills and they cooked lunch for them, hamburger, hot dogs for the protesters. And I took one to one of the guys. He was from Zebra, and it was hot, really hot. So I said, let's go across City Hall and get a soda. So we went into City Hall. Never been to City Hall. We went upstairs to the conference room, and I got a Diet Coke, and he got a Coke, and we sat at the conference room and just got cooled off, and I got to know him a little bit. And then we saw the chief of police poke his nose in, and I'm sure he was just checking to make sure I was okay, because he probably saw me go in the building with this guy. And I said, Chief, come on in, meet my friend. And they sat down for about half an hour, and they exchanged phone numbers. And all of a sudden, this young guy who was afraid of the police had a conversation and drank a Coca-Cola with the chief of police, who gave him his phone number and said, call me if there's a problem.
Wow.
Back to blood tie.
built bridges, and I guess that's, figuratively, building bridges.
Yeah.
But, I could go on and on. Being mayor of Beaufort is the highest honor anyone could ever probably be mayor of anyone's hometown. But I think Beaufort is that much more special than any other place. It was a great honor, and in many ways I didn't want to retire, but I was 72, and I said, it's time for another generation. I've done this a long time, and I'm glad I did, because I wouldn't want to be mayor today. Everybody's complaining about everything, and everybody's all over social media. Yeah. So, but that's the greatest honor. We get the bridge, city hall, police department, Boundary Street, Day Dock. They're finishing up Allison Road now, the sidewalks, repaving it, put up street lights to connect Spanish Moss Trail, which I shouldn't forget, because I think it will be one day, if it isn't already, serve the same purpose and be of equal value to the waterfront park.
Yeah.
And to the quality of life in Beaufort. It was a great contribution that I think to the city. And it was, luckily, most of it was paid for with private dollars.
Oh.
Got to finish it and get it to Seabrook, to the Whale Ranch.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it will happen.
Anybody ever died and gone to heaven and gone to hell?
Please share. We would love to hear the story. Yes.
It's one of the most unique things. And I was sailing with my brother, and we were getting ready to race, and a gust hit us, and the boat, we had a mistake with the boat. And we went over, which was no big deal. You always we turned over, we were kids, and we could ride the boat. But someone was there to tow us, and so I said, I'm going to go underwater and get into the boat and pull out a line. And I didn't come up. And finally I came up, and I was spitting out water and vomiting, and my brother took my pulse, and there was no pulse. And they got me into a power boat, and they took me over to the dock at the hospital. Well, that dying in that half hour, that
It was in half hour.
literally alive, was the most pleasant experience I've ever had. And
Wow.
I was like floating. I mean, there was never, either they may have given me some sort of medication to drop your memory, to lose your memory. But my memory of it was I was floating in the beautiful blue sky on top of the clouds, looking down at Beaufort with not a worry in the world. And then I woke up in a hospital bed with 10 broken ribs.
Oh my gosh.
So heaven and then hell.
Yeah.
All in the same day.
And it was 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow. And that wasn't that long ago either.
No, it was about 4 years.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, Billy, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on, for your contributions to Beaufort, for the community that you've helped make it. This has been a true honor.
Yes, you have quite a legacy behind you. So thank you.